G'day, welcome back to Project Brupeg, the story of a sunken fishing trawler converting into a polar expedition boat. Last week you saw us get stuck into our anchor room redesign. This week we finish that off, we make a few more modifications up the front so we don't have any long-term problems with rust, and then we get stuck into the sandblasting and painting of that room. So because when we wet blast all of this area of rust and so on around the anchor room, we're going to end up with a lot of water and sand, so we need to get rid of that. So that's why we've created the sump. The sump will become an integral part of this room later on, but at the moment we've just jimmied up our pump. Now this is a bore pump, so it's capable of handling small rocks, sand, mud, all that sort of stuff. So what we've got is just basically a 1.25 inch pipe with a piece of my vacuum cleaner. I'm just going to stick it in there like that, and that's the old outlet for the shelf that we've just cut out. But basically that's going to allow me to pump all of the rubbish out of this room while I'm blasting, so the room will stay relatively clear of crap. Now there's a couple of things we've got to tackle. So we've got to tackle all of the surface rust, so you can sort of see where I've basically bashed it away, and yeah, we'll get into that and make sure that we're dealing with white metal all the way back. If I need to take more off with the hammer drill I will, and then yeah, I want to get in right up and behind here, so you can sort of see this is the area that the anchor chain, the bitter end, bolts onto. I've got to get in there and make sure that that's all nice and lovely. I don't want any issues with that. A couple of little bits down here that we found, and then this here is my only real area of concern in this whole room is this, until I've got behind that foam and I can see what's going on, because when I was bashing away with the hammer drill, if you come right down, look at that. So there's a piece of 6mm that's basically just disappeared, and I think rather than fixing it properly they just threw friggin' foam in there. So my plan is to blast all of that out so that I can understand what I'm working with. If I need to repair it I will, if I need to replace it, etc. But I pretty much just want to keep digging until I know what I'm working with. I don't think it's going to be that big a deal, but still I want to know before I seal this room up and sign it off as finished. This morning's job, we got the blaster up on the deck. Trev is down there in charge. Hello.
Just closing up.
Trev's down there in charge of the of Stan Lee, the yellow water blaster. And what the plan is, you're not allowed to laugh at how much shit I've got on the front deck at the moment. That's what I was after. Right, got me face thingy. Up on the top here, we're going to blast the stainless corners that we welded in a while back. So we've taped up, you can see the windows and so on are all taped up and hidden. We're going to blast all of these down to a nice finish so we can start painting them. Came up pretty good, so you can sort of see that's your mild steel and that's your stainless. That's obviously the colour difference. Mild gets that little tinge of rust on it, but it's a nice finish that we'll be able to blast now. Be able to paint pretty easy. You can sort of see all in there. The welds are reasonable condition, not the best welds in the world, but they'll be fine. And then I didn't realise it when I built it, but I've actually built a very slight low spot. You can sort of see the water pools just above there, so hopefully when the boat's in the water it'll sit a bit further bow up and that'll disappear. It's pretty windy at the moment, it's probably blowing 20 knots up here, so we're giving up for the day, and we haven't finished this side, so we'll go over this side in the morning. So sand machine back on the ground, Trev's hauling it up to the front. We're going to start lifting it up with a crane. We're going to blast inside the anchor room. So we've got our crane out, we've hooked up one of our blocks. These were donated by Tim, lovely big Lumar blocks. So directly below us, that's where the sand machine is. We're going to swing the crane over and just start hauling it up. Right, so we've cleaned the junk out of the room, we're ready to blast. So we've got our little short stubby blaster that Trevor and I built this morning. We're going to go through and we'll start tackling these areas that have got surface rust on them and things. Lovely! So this is sort of halfway through. I apologise for the crap on the screen. Very hard to clean it at the moment. Gives you an idea. We haven't quite finished. You can still see there's a few black marks. Like this sort of thing here is basically surface rust, so we'll get rid of that as well. It's pretty hard to see what I'm doing. I'm just basically blasting by braille. So you can see around here as well, there's a wee bit more surface discoloration in there to get rid of. And then up in here, this is a piece of stainless welded to a piece of mile. So we'll get it, I'll blast all of that off. I won't bother painting this again, I'll blast all of that off. I like to keep my stainless paint free, just so that I can always sort of see the condition. Won't necessarily hide anything if it's not painted. And then the other thing is I'll get in and I'll blast all this foam out. So I actually use the sandblaster to rip all of that out. Much easier than trying to dig it by hand. And then I'll get in and get some of this rust that's down in here as well. But yeah, it's starting to come along nicely. So I think what we'll do now is put the pump in and we'll empty out this lake. Hey! I mean, that's pretty quick. This is the shower scene a lot of you have been waiting for. So we need to make sure that we can sign this job off without there being any sort of rust or any issues going forward. We found a bit of rust in the front. I'm going to show you why I love steel boats. This is the floor of the anchor room. You can see leading right up to the very front of the boat, and you've got that big thick piece of steel. It's 25mm thick. That's the stem of the boat. So this is basically what leads the boat through the water. And you can see there's a whole bunch of garbage. Look at all that black crap and rust and all sorts of stuff down there. So there's a piece of 6mm plate that's just completely rusted out. It's a bit of a design fault. Essentially they created a pocket where water and mud and garbage and stuff could sit, and then obviously it's just rusted it out. Now, the thing that I love about steel boats is I can just plasma that out and weld new steel in, and it's a morning's job. It could be quite bad, but because it's steel, it's easy enough to repair. If this was a wood boat, you'd be pulling the entire front end of the boat apart to actually replace the wood beams that you'd need to replace, because essentially wood is a collection of parts held together that if any one of them goes, it puts strain on the next one. Steel's a bit different because it's all welded together. It's essentially one big piece of steel. So you can get away with a lot more in a steel boat. Hence they're pretty much used for commercial boats religiously because it's just so robust. Now what we're going to do this morning is plasma out all of this bad, crappy rust, see what we're working with. We'll get the hammer drill in, bash all of the, you can sort of see right down there. Let me get the light. There we go, look at that. Ooh, looks awful. Dreadful. And none of that is going to be too hard to repair. I still need to blast the foam out, but most of it, like the steel work's all out. Doesn't look too bad. There's a bit of corrosion on the stem, but nothing I can't pad weld.
Oh. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Both sides too.
Yeah. Been up there. You see the patch they put in? Sort of down like that. But then they missed all this crap. Blast it, pad weld it up. I just turn the welder down, put the first layer on as if I'm welding 2mm steel, and then heat it up. Do a 6mm weld on top of it. Our plan to repair this part of the boat is to pad weld initially. It's a repair that will last a number of years. It's going to be painted, so there'll be no issues in terms of it wearing out or anything along those lines. When we do our ice modifications, we will likely cut these plates off and just replace them with new steel.
We were young and we were free and running, never bothered about what could be coming. Every day we danced and life was smiling. We were young and drunk in love. A few years later I started thinking, if it's just love in every glass I'm drinking, we're like one and without you I'm sinking. I'm always shining next to you. We were young and we were free and running, never bothered about what could be coming. Every day we danced and life was smiling.
We're so close to getting this signed off. There's a couple of last minute jobs that we have to just tidy up before we can get out of here. So behind me, all of the blasting and cutting that we've done for this shelf area. Wherever we've cut something, we've got sharp edges, so we need to round all of that off so the paint will stick. I need to get in there then and we've done a little bit of pad welding in some areas that I wanted to just beef up a bit, so I want to give those a bit of a quick flapper off on top to make them relatively smooth, and then I'm going to give them a blast so the paint sticks. Once we've done that, geez, we're almost ready for paint. We'll give it a final blast off, we'll give it some rust kill, let it set for probably 24 hours or so, and then we'll get in there with some epoxy and we'll start building some layers on.
You make me wanna sing, and so I do. So if you want, I'll be right there. Anything you want, for you, my sweetheart. I'll be by your side, and when I do, get to see your smile.
Yeah, I just need to have a quick conversation about design up here. So the thought that I had is, what do we do with this, right? And one thought I had was I can build a plate and then another plate, like build a box basically, so that any crap will run down onto the floor. Or I can just cut these off on an angle, leave them, and like paint everything and then fill that up with epoxy so that any shit that goes down will run onto the floor. Okay.
What about you?
Yeah, that's my preference because it's so fast.
Okay, easy.
Alright, cool. I started making the box just in case the micro balloons over the road, which is like you make a filler. It's just epoxy.
So you have to sandblast to be able to make it hold?
Well, I'll sandblast everything anyway,
Right.
and then I'll rust kill and epoxy paint it, and then I'll put the epoxy filler on. I'll try and scoop it on an angle and everything so that anything that hits will automatically run down, you know? Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That saves a heap of time. Take my little cardboard works out of here.
You must be so hot down there.
I've just got a little bit of cutting to do on the edge and then I'm done. Is there a hammer up there? Lovely. Thank you.
Do you need help or you're alright?
Nah, I can just easy job.
Okay. Shout out if you need anything.
Alright, thanks, Dolly.
Okay.
I just watched a video of Stu's and he was saying that 50% of your time is spent fixing tools or waiting for parts to arrive or what have you. Let me show you my 50% of the time fixing tools. I fired the blaster up and got it all up and running and got everything going up the top, and then went and squirted it and realised firstly we got bugger all water coming out, but we've also got no air coming out of it, so I forgot to turn the compressor on, which is fine. It's over there, but when you're inside the front of the boat it's a long way away. But one of the things I'm struggling with at the moment is I haven't got it running at the second, so I can't show you, but when I pull the trigger I'm getting pressure all the way through the hose, but I'm not getting it out the end of the lance. So what I need to do is strip the lance down and understand why it's blocked. It's the first time it's done it, but yeah, I don't know, we'll see how we go. So yeah, pull that apart and get that going.
Out in stormy weather, I might have the blues, but nothing ever stopped me from dusting off my shoes. You might think you'll see me falling to the ground, but I threw up my umbrella when rain stops hitting down.
So we're on the home stretch. We're going to go in there now and start prepping for paint. We've basically done all the blasting, all the cutting, all the welding, everything like that's complete. I've gone over the red paint, which is a chlorinated rubber. I've gone through that and basically give it a real good rough up with the sandblaster, so the surface is capable of taking another layer of epoxy over top of it. So what I'm going to do now, get in there, clean out all the sand and all the garbage that's left over, and we'll start mixing up some 2-pack epoxy that we're going to be putting on. Now the epoxy that we're using is a high build base, so that yellowy sort of colour that you can sort of see on the side deck there, that's the same paint that we're going to be using today. And you don't get a huge amount of coverage per litre, but that's because it's such a high build paint. But I really do want that in the anchor room, mainly because it's an area that's going to take a hiding, so you know, chain is almost certainly going to be bashing against us at some point. Wood's going to be rubbing against it. There's going to be all sorts of stuff that goes on in there, and yeah, I want to give it the best chance that I can of essentially not wearing off and not going down to steel and starting that whole rust process again. So we'll get in, we'll prep it, we'll start getting some paint in. I didn't realise this, the paint that we're using, Jodacoat 605, is bloody amazing. Listen to this, this is the product description from the TDS. This is a 2-part poly something or other cured epoxy coating. I don't know what that word is, probably not important. It's a surface tolerant high solids product, i.e. high build, quite thick. The product is tintable, blah blah blah, you can have lots of colours. It's specifically designed for areas where optimal surface prep is not possible or even desired. It can be used as a primer, mid-coat, finish coat, or as a single coat system in above waterline and below waterline environments. Suitable for properly prepared carbon steel, galvanised steel, stainless steel, aluminium, concrete, and a range of aged coating surfaces. I think they probably just left off and NASA rockets. A trick that we were shown by one of the old salts: run a bead of sealant on either side of your rib like this, paint over top, stops any muck getting underneath of it. So there are some repairs that I need to do up the front. Mainly it's a modification to a crappy design. At the very front of the boat there's two little dimples that sink down and crap can get down in there. This is standard just bargain basement epoxy resin. I'm going to be putting in some micro balloons. Basically micro balloons are tiny little bubbles of something, glass, plastic, something like that. I don't know quite what it is, but it's essentially a filler. So if you've never seen this stuff before, let me just open it up. It's a bit like talcum powder, but it's light as and it goes everywhere. Right, so there you go. You sort of see, it doesn't weigh a lot. There's a lot of basically air in it. So what my plan is, if I can get a stick that I've prepared earlier, it's going to break some up and dump it into the resin, and we'll mix this into a filler. So this is what they use as a fairing compound on boats, and it can be used in under the waterline in permanently immersed boats, so it's quite a hardy product, and that's mainly because of the resin. The resin itself is epoxy, so that it's really capable resin. The micro balloons are not really, I think they're pretty impervious to water and things like that, so hence it's an underwater capable product. There's no real set amount that you need to put in, it's more just the consistency you want. We want it quite stiff. I can already feel the epoxy heating up in the cup, so because of the chemical reaction it gets hot. Can put quite a bit of this stuff in. There we go, it's starting to get quite thick now. I've used this stuff to fair the bathroom on Brupeg a while back, and there's a trick to doing it. You can basically get it in to wherever you're trying to fair up, and then 20 minutes later, when it's sort of set on the surface but not underneath, go back with some water on your fingers and just run your fingers over the whole thing, and you can smooth it up, and it takes about 90% of your sanding time out of the job. It really speeds up the process, makes it real easy, because water doesn't affect it. That's why you use water, just provides like a lubricant when you're running your fingers over the area to be smoothed off. It's taken a lot more than I thought it was going to take. Okay, it's still quite runny. Gonna need a bigger container at this rate. I kind of want the consistency of like peanut butter, something that's stiff enough to be able to push into a hole and shape, but not so runny that it's going to run down and flatten itself out like wet paint would. You can tell when a resin's starting to set because it gets hot, and it's pretty warm right now. It's not kicking, like it's still, you know, plenty runny enough consistency wise and all that sort of stuff, but it is starting to get hot. Alright, let's go stick this in the anchor room. Kind of want to smear it around so it runs up the side a little bit and then comes down and smooths itself off. Doesn't matter if it doesn't look pretty, because all of this is going to get painted and dealt with and whatever, but you can always smooth it out. Like so. This is the pad welding. Smooth a bunch of that up so that any goo will just slide straight over top. That's what happens when it kicks. You get a big lump of stuff growing in the middle. So this is what we ended up with. Lovely clean white room. So you can see we've got our floor in, the sump's welded in nicely, the shelf is out, we've got a nice sort of radiused cut at the front, the ribs are all nice and ground off and radiused. Nice clean working environment in there. No more rust to deal with, and that front's resolved. There's a couple of smaller jobs that we need to do to finish that room off completely. So we just need to make the stainless pipe that takes the water from the sump stripping pump out over the side of the boat. It's a relatively easy job. We'll get that welded up in the next few days. And we need to actually make a containment setup for the chain that's going in there. So we're actually just going to use hardwood. We've seen a few ideas. One I really like is one that was suggested by a viewer for like using a big plastic tube basically that comes down from the hose pipe down to the bottom of that room. I have sort of done a bit of hunting around and I can't actually find any plastic pipe that's strong enough, that's a big enough diameter. I need something that's at least sort of 450 millimeters, 500 millimeters diameter, just because of the amount of chain that we have. We use 16 millimeter chain on Brupeg. So for now we're just going to use hardwood. We're going to create a containment box inside that room. Now the wood will be sacrificial and it'll be replaced every few years, but it's basically just there to stop the steelwork from getting any bash marks and so on it and keep the rust at bay.
You got eyes like summer sky. If you're smart, could kill or die. And now it starts to rain, so let's enjoy it.